Okay. Okay. Well, my subject is about the angel of Yahweh, and I'm using the New Jerusalem Bible because it puts it in that transliteration, as opposed to being all, it's less Hebrew, but Yahweh is transliterated, and the the idea is just to go through this phrase here and see how it is used, because there are other phrases such as the angel of Elohim, uh, as well as different ways of identifying the speaker and the listener, and I came across this subject. I did an intensive study on this subject maybe about 15 years ago, uh, and I found it very fascinating. So, uh, and especially I say a lot of times that the Bible is like a big soap opera, because once you get involved in the story, it's just so fascinating. All the personal interactions and all of the personalities and the intrigue and the suspense and the drama. And so I remember things by the stories and the relationships of the people. And I'm one of these people that can get hooked on soap operas if I would watch them, because you get involved with the story, and so that's a story of the Bible. Is it's just I just get sucked into it, and I just want to know, well, what's the next thing that's going to happen, and how does this all work together, and who did what, and how do the stories work out, and so the story of the angel of Yahweh has always been fascinating to me. And so it's a little bit what I wanted to do was just go through the scriptures, and then as we have discussion, we can talk about the ramifications, and anybody is free uh, to raise a question, even slide by slide, because I don't think I'll even get through the slides that I have prepared. But the first time in the book of Genesis where the phrase "the angel of Yahweh" is found is in Genesis chapter 16 and verse 6. And this is breaking into the story, again, the soap opera of Abram, Sarai, and his handmaiden Hagar, which Sarai asked Abraham if he would make a baby with her handmaid, and then later she didn't like that idea. She must have changed her mind, because when there was a conflict between them, so Sarah it says, and Sarah ill-treated Hagar, so she fled from her. And this is at the point where Hagar is first pregnant, because there's another instance of the angel speaking to her later, but this is the very first instance right now. And verse 7, it says, the angel of Yahweh found her, Hagar, by a spring in the desert, the spring on the road to Shur. Okay. No, I think, oh, okay. I need to go back. I missed a step in the process of sharing screen here. I'll go back to this one here and start it as a slideshow. Excuse me, I thought I was all set up. Okay. Oops. sorry.
Your slideshow freeze up?
No, it was just that I didn't go back into it right, and then it wouldn't go to the next slide. So here we go to the next slide. So what I wanted to do was to juxtapose a little bit, because the previous account was in Genesis 16. So what I want to do is set it up in our minds that we're focusing on the angel of Yahweh, but then in Genesis 15:1, we see here where the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision and said, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I'm your shield, and will give you a very great reward." Verse 4 says, "Then the word of Yahweh came to him in reply, such a one will not be your heir. No, your heir will be the issue from your own body." So we see here as Abram is talking to God, and God is talking to Abram, and we see the different ways that this is all happening. So we have the angel of Yahweh, we have the word of Yahweh, we have the angel of Elohim later. So I just wanted to set up that, be thinking about if there's any what the distinctions are, because this is what this is we're looking at distinctions. And then also, when Abraham addressed the word of Yahweh, he addressed him as Lord Yahweh, predicated with Adonai Yahweh. In verse 7, he said to him, "I am Yahweh who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this country as your possession." In verse 8, "Lord Yahweh," Abram replied, "how can I know that I shall possess it?" So kind of juxtapositioning the different phrases as to how, who addresses who, and how they address each other. And so this is where, when a question comes up, just interrupt, and we can go through. But now I'm going back to Genesis 16 with the account of Hagar. And he said, "Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" And Hagar said, "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai." She replied. The angel of Yahweh said to her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." So we see the angel of Yahweh is speaking to Sarah, and appearing, in a form that looks to her like a man. See, Hagar knew that it was Yahweh who saw her and spoke to her. In verse 11, the angel of Yahweh said to her, "Now you have conceived and will bear a son, and you shall call him Ishmael, for Yahweh has heard your cries of distress. A wild donkey of a man he will be, his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him, living his life in defiance of all his kinsmen." And Hagar gave a name to Yahweh, who had spoken to her. "You are El Roi," which she meant, "Did I not go on seeing here after him who sees me?" In other words, that El Roi means God who sees. Okay, another account is in Genesis chapter 22, verse 18, where Yahweh promised Abraham the greatest promise because of his obedience. It says, "In your seed all of the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have obeyed my voice." And this is quoted in Romans 4, verse 18. It says, "When God promised Abraham that he would become the father of many nations, Abraham believed him. God has also said, your descendants will be as numerous as the stars, even though such a promise seemed utterly impossible. And although that covenant made there, and the promise was not only that Abraham would be the father of many nations, but that the Messiah would come through his family line. If we look at Acts 13, verse 22, it says, after removing Saul, he made David their king. He testified concerning him, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. Verse 23, from this man's descendants, God has brought to Israel the Savior Jesus, as he promised. So the connection there, the promises made to Abraham, continued on through, right through the Bible. The next instance where the angel of Yahweh appears as the angel of Yahweh is to Moses in the burning bush. Exodus 3, verse 2. The angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame blazing from the middle of a bush. Moses looked, but there was the bush blazing, but the bush was not being burnt up. And this is referred back to in Judges 2, verse 1. The angel of Yahweh went up from Gilgal to Bethel and said, I have brought you out of Egypt and led you into this country, which I promised on oath to your ancestors. I said, I shall never break my covenant with you. So we see here that the angel of Yahweh was the one who appeared in the burning bush and led Israel out of Egypt.
So is this where we can just interrupt you?
Yes.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Sorry for that extra noise before. I just wanted to point out in the burning bush, he called out his name, Moses, 2 times, right? Moses, Moses. Okay. I just wonder, was it the same voice or was there 2 separate voices? That's all the question I had.
Oh, good question to put up there for everybody. Yes. Yes. Well, in Exodus 13, verse 21, it says that Yahweh preceded them by day in a pillar of cloud to show them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could march day and by night. And so here we see the reference to the angel of Yahweh speaking and leading them through the wilderness. But then here in chapter 13, verse 21, it doesn't say the angel of Yahweh, it says Yahweh preceded them. So it kind of, well, it leads up to the question, as you know, which would be, all questions are good. Was this one person, 2 persons, or was this an angel representing as like an ambassador? And so when we're talking Yahweh speaking, is it speaking through the angel of Yahweh? You know, Yahweh speaking through the angel of Yahweh? All of these questions are good, and I'm really don't, you know, I'm just doing the introduction. I'm not getting to the conclusion. You know, we'll see if others, you know, what other questions are brought up, but it's just my purpose here is just to bring up the scriptures and throw it out to all those involved with the study and for discussion. Okay, in verse 14, verse 19, we see the angel of God. This is not the angel of Yahweh, but the angel of God, of Elohim, who preceded the army of Israel, changed station and followed behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from their front and took position behind them. So is the angel of Elohim synonymous with the angel of Yahweh? I'm just bringing these points up, and as to how this is all working, well, we can maybe start working on understanding it as we discuss.
Well, Mike,
Yes.
how many angels do you think there are?
Oh, I don't know. I'm bringing this up.
Well, in Revelation, it talks about them sitting before their throne. There's millions of angels.
About 200 million, I think it says there. Yes.
There's a ton. I don't know. I mean, it'd be impossible. That's a realm that I don't think we're supposed to have a firm grip on. I mean, there's a captain of the guard, that appeared to Joshua, the angels in the fire with Daniel and the lions, and all those. The angels are, I mean, they're everywhere. Who knows if we have personal angels or not, but I mean, they're all working for him, right? They're his ministers of fire. So I mean, I think it'd be impossible to nail down a position, for each angel. You know what I mean?
Well, see, that's very good discussion. That's what I'm hoping to have, and let everybody think about this and interact, because this is a good way to learn more and understand. That's the main thing that I take from this the study that I had years ago, and as I broke back into it, it just, wow, I keep seeing more things every time I look at it.
Mike, are you showing your PowerPoint right now? Because it's not
It's
coming through at our end.
Well, it's up on my screen.
Yeah,
I-
well, did you share it?
Oh my. Well, let me get back out.
Well, no, just
I-
minimize it. Minimize it, go to share screen. It'll ask you what you want to share, and then click on the PowerPoint window.
Well, I thought I did that, but that's where I got a little bit mixed up. Okay. Oh, I see here. Yes. Okay, I'll do it again. Okay, guide me through and make sure I thought it was up, but it wasn't. Okay. I'll do this here.
There we go.
Okay, now tell me if I lose it when I go to the
Start slide, or
Yeah, from the beginning.
Okay, now we have a full slide.
Okay, so you see it, the first slide?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll just go through it. Just, I'm sorry about that. Genesis 15, 16. Bring it up to where we were. Well, thank you for pointing that out, because I didn't realize that I was not sharing. Yeah, here's the angel of Yahweh appearing to Moses, the pillar of the cloud. And this is where the slide that I left off on. Okay, then this gets back to Israel going through the wilderness. Deuteronomy 32, for I shall proclaim the name of Yahweh, O tell the greatness of our God. Jacob has eaten to his heart's content, Jeshurun, which that's an interesting word, because Yeshu is salvation. So this is the one who was saved, is what Yeshurun means. So the one who was saved, grown fat, and is now lashed out. You have grown fat, gross, and bloated, and disowned the God who made him, and dishonored the rock of his salvation, whose jealousy they aroused with foreigners. I see now. My bottom line is needs to be moved down. I'll see if I can do that. There we go. Okay, with things detestable. Uh, Here we go. So this brings up the subject of the rock. Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses, verse 30. How else could one man rout 1,000? How could two put 10,000 to flight? Were it not that their rock has sold them, that Yahweh has delivered them up? Their rock is not like our rock. Our enemies cannot pray for us. Where are their gods then? He will ask. The rock where they sought refuge. Okay, and who is this rock? Uh, Jumping ahead to 1 Samuel 2, verse 2, basically says the same thing. There is no holy one like Yahweh. Indeed, there is none but you, no rock like our God. He said, Yahweh is my rock and my fortress. For who is God but Yahweh? Who is a rock but our God? I believe that'd be Elohim. Uh, our our Elohim is Yahweh is our rock. Uh, Life to Yahweh. Blessed be my rock. Exalted be the God of my salvation. And then we have more references to the rock. The God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over men in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God, of Elohim, Yahweh is my rock and my fortress. My deliverer is my God. I take refuge in him, my rock, my shield, my saving strength, my stronghold, my place of refuge. For who is God but Yahweh? Who is a rock but our God? And the Apostle Paul identifies the rock that led Israel in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1. I want you to be quite certain, brothers, that our ancestors all had the cloud over them and all passed through the sea. In the cloud and in the sea, they were all baptized into Moses, all ate the same spiritual food, all drank the same spiritual drink, since they drank from the spiritual rock which followed them, and that rock was Christ. So we see that the one who became Christ was there with them also at the going through as they passed through the Red Sea. And also we see here that Yahweh Sabaoth, which would translate the of hosts, Yahweh of hosts, of armies, you might say, is the rock. Isaiah 44, verse 8, it says, have no fear, do not be afraid. Have I not told you and revealed it long ago? You are my witnesses. Is there any God except me? There is no rock, I know of none. Yahweh Sabaoth is the one you will proclaim holy. Him you will dread. Him you will fear. He will be a sanctuary, a stumbling stone, a rock to trip up the two houses of Israel, a snare and a trap for the inhabitants. That's where I'm a little bit covered up. So we'll go on. So we see that Yahweh went before Israel in the cloud. Go
Michael,
ahead. Yes.
go back to that other screen before.
Yes.
I was just trying to look at this translations 44:8. What translation are you using?
New Jerusalem. I'm using
Okay.
that because it distinguishes, instead of just saying Lord, it says Yahweh.
Well, I was just looking that in the King Jimmy, there's no rock. Fear not, neither afraid. Have not I told you from that time, and have I declared it? You are even my witnesses. Is there a God beside me? Yea, there is no God. I know not any. There is no rock. That's not in my Bible. I'd have to look at the Septuagint. Okay, I just wanted to see what translation you were using.
Okay, I could bring up the Hebrew, but we can maybe do that after. Also, if you
Yeah.
make a little note, then I can
Yeah.
bring up my my online Bible and read the Hebrew, as well as I have the Greek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good.
Okay,
All right,
we'll put a
thanks.
little check mark on that one and come back.
Okay.
Now you know why I was wanting to leave it open all the way from the beginning. This is all bringing up good points.
One of the things that could be done is you could put that little note in the chat room. That way you have a hard copy, and if we forget, the questions are all in order, and you can go back through. You're saying check mark, you just put it on there, chat room too.
Oh, okay. But now the listeners can bring up all the points and put them in the chat room. Would that be better than probably?
Well, I mean, you can still break in, but if it's another point, just put it in the chat room, and then we can
Yeah.
cover
Okay.
them all.
Yeah. Anybody? Actually, yeah, it's a good idea. Everybody, put your questions in the chat room, and then we can go through it point by point, and not forget them. Okay. Going back now to Numbers 12, verse 5. It says, and Yahweh descended in the pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent. I'm kind of, you probably can think of a lot of accounts leading up to this, and so I'm trying to focus on the word Yahweh and angel of Yahweh. So, to look for distinctions. So we know we could probably think of all the events in between, but in Numbers 12, verse 5, this is after the pillar of fire and after Moses being up on Mount Sinai, and then when they set up the tent of meeting outside of the camp. So this is the point here, and he called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. Yahweh said, listen to my words. If there is a prophet among you, I reveal myself to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. To him, my whole household is entrusted. To him I speak face to face, panim a panim, plainly, and not in riddles. And he sees Yahweh's form. How then do you dare criticize my servant Moses? And so I put this slide in to show that at this point, Moses and Yahweh are on very good speaking terms. As a friend, speaking face to face as another friend, which it took a bit to get to this point. They shared a number of very trying experiences together in dealing with the people of Israel. And so I just wanted to earmark this one too. Anybody has any points on this, that would be a good one to earmark for later.
Hey, Mike, it's Al.
Yes.
I would just like to make the point, you said they covered a lot of territory between them. You could even say they went over some rocky ground in their relationship.
Yes, especially as
Unintended.
Yahweh wanted to wipe out the whole tribe of Israel, the whole nation of Israel, and start a new tribe only through Moses. And then Moses stood up
Yep.
and said, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, I mean, that was
Pretty gutsy thing to do.
it was a tense moment because of the rebellion, that golden calf incident there. That was seemed to be a
deal breaker.
Well, it was a potential deal breaker, yes.
But the thing is, you said they covered a lot of difficult turf.
Oh my!
You could say rocky ground.
And yeah, this is the whole thing about the Israelites, and with their peculiar nature, is here they saw the 10 plagues in Egypt, they went through, the Red Sea opened up for them, and they went through on dry ground, and they had the miracles of the water and of the manna, and then not only that, God spoke to them that they could hear him. He spoke. The voice was as thunder, and spoke to them directly, giving them the words, the 10 words. And of course, then the people were all afraid, and then they turned right around and build the golden calf. And what kind of people would see those miracles and then still go off the wrong way? It was a very unique tribe that were called to be the chosen people. A very, what do they say in Israel? A lot of chutzpah is one of the characteristics of Israelites.
But it's a lot. What you're saying is, it's a lot like any partnership, even partnerships in this world. If you're not pulling in the same direction in unison and with the same end goal in mind, you're going to have a lot of tension. And you can see that this is a kind of a partnership.
Yes. And so Yahweh, and I did cover this because it didn't have the phrase angel of Yahweh, but if we go back to Genesis 18, Abraham had covered a lot of experience, different experiences with Yahweh, and Abraham was a friend of Yahweh, and Yahweh could speak to Abraham face to face in the same way that he did with Moses. But it seemed to me as I was putting this together that at first it was the angel of Yahweh appearing in the burning bush, and then here it was Yahweh face to face with Moses. And but not only with Moses, but Aaron and Miriam both came forward. And
so since no man can see his face and live, do you think he spoke as in the appearance of a human, or do you think that Moses saw his glory?
well, those are questions that I'm raising, and I would say earmark that one because that might be a good discussion.
Well, the only thing that throws a wrench in this is Yeshua said, "You have never seen his voice, or heard his voice, or seen his shape at any time."
Yes,
So
the Father, you're saying, yes.
yeah, you've never seen him. So, and we know Yeshua's name was never Yahweh. So that's what throws a wrench in there for me, because and that's what makes me think that the angels are more involved than we thought. And I think that's what kind of point you're kind of trying to make. But
well, yes, and people can take it many ways also, and that's one other point I wanted to show is that people can read the same phrase and come up with different conclusions, and that we can understand different people's points of view and where they're coming from, because I just keep seeing new things the more I read. and we'll all come up with different things at different times even. So how does this work? But we see here that one way or another, Yahweh spoke with Moses face to face. Yes. But so, well, good. We're getting a good discussion, and
And not just Yahweh. He's having a conversation, not just Moses. He's having a conversation with Moses and Miriam, and I mean they're having a powwow here.
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and my belief, I can say one opinion here. My opinion is this is how we receive the Torah. was the face-to-face dictation. In other words, Moses was the scribe taking dictation. That's my view of the Torah, is that it was dictated.
Didn't Yahweh write one of those sets with his own finger though?
Yes, and with the finger, yes, that was the stone that the words were written on, the 10 words. Yes, yes, which was held in the Ark of the Covenant that they carried with them and was in the tabernacle. Yes.
I think it was the first set that he wrote, and the second set, I think Moses had to bring a chisel with him and had to redo it. But at any rate,
right,
I'll
right.
go back to my lurking.
Well, it's good. Then I hope this is an interesting subject for everybody, like it is for me. I just keep going over it and learning new things.
Question, Michael. I'm looking at. Was it your thoughts that Moses was able to see the Father's face? Did I get that correct, or am I mistaken in that?
Oh, no, I'm not bringing up at this point, I'm not bringing up the Father or the Son myself.
Okay, let's put it this way. I use the word Jehovah instead of Yahweh.
Well, that would be modern Hebrew, and this translation uses what they feel is the more ancient way, which all of them are correct according to grammar in Hebrew. But
actually, yeah, there's some good studies out there that they aren't. It came from actually one person and then two of his people that worked with him, and there was a mistake right way at the beginning but that's a story of another.
That's another study, yes. And
yeah,
so
but I was thinking about Moses, and did he see Jehovah? I would say face to face, and Exodus 33, 20, and he said, "You cannot see my face, for there shall no man see me and live." So he could only see his backside as he put him into part of the cliff.
Yes.
Backside.
Well, my indication here, which I'm opening it up to everybody, I'm not going to be stating any doctrinal point, but what I would say is this was, a physical manifestation as opposed to, another thing to take into a point. And this is probably a very good point to bring it up, but when we speak of the creator of the whole universe, we're talking about the aspect of our creator that is beyond the dimensions even of our whole physical universe, as large as it is. So we're talking about the aspect, and David brings this up later. I have this in another slide set, and David says, how can the very being who the universe cannot contain come and inhabit my stone temple that I have built? So these are all questions. I mean, these are all things just to really keep looking at. How can the being who is transcendent, above and beyond the whole physical universe, come and deal with us one-on-one, face-to-face, as we see it saying here? And that is a mystery which puzzled King David. And so what I'm doing is hopefully just introducing the concept of how can the transcendent God be, the technically right word is eminent. In other words, appearing before us in a way that's eminent to us. In other words, we can see the Father is, or the Son, or however we look at it, how can our Creator manifest on our own level? And is it the Creator manifesting or being represented by angels? These are all the questions that are the mysteries. And, we all have different viewpoints on. So I'm not, the more I learn, the less I say, well, I got it all figured out. So and what's so fascinating about this to me is just to see the personality involved as these interactions are taking place. And here we see, I went up to Numbers 22, verse 22, the angel of Yahweh appears before Balaam. And I look at this as the humorous interlude, because I think we all know the story of Balaam and King Balak of Moab wanting to have Balaam deal with these Israelites and their God, because he knew that Balaam was a prophet of Yahweh, of Elohim, that he was probably a descendant of Abraham, and separately from the nation of Israel maintained some semblance of worship of the God of Abraham. And so Balaam has, to me, this is a pretty humorous interlude, because he's on his way to go to see King Balak, and just the very fact that he went to talk to the king of Moab kindled Yahweh's anger. And the angel of Yahweh took his stand on the road to bar his way. And Balaam was riding his donkey with his two servants that were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. And so this is getting into the humorous part, that, here's the prophet of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or a cousin of the Israelites. And the donkey can see the angel of Yahweh, but the prophet can't. And so here we have the angel of Yahweh visible to the donkey with the sword in his hand, and the donkey just turned off the road into the open country. And Balaam struck the donkey like the donkey was being a bad donkey. So here you have the prophet can't even see the angel of Yahweh. And the angel of Yahweh then went and stood on a narrow path among the vineyards, with a wall to the right and a wall to the left. And the donkey again saw the angel of Yahweh and scraped against the wall, scraping Balaam's foot against it. So Balaam struck his donkey again. Well, then the angel of Yahweh moved and stood in a place so narrow that there was no room to pass either to right or left. I mean, the angel was playing with Balaam here. Like, when's this guy going to get it? Doesn't he understand that there's something going on, and just drawing the whole thing out. And so when the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh, she just laid down underneath Balaam. And Balaam flew into a rage and struck the donkey with a stick. And Yahweh then gave the donkey the power to talk. And she said to Balaam, "What harm have I done you? For you strike me 3 times like this." And Balaam was so caught up in his anger, it didn't even faze him that his donkey was talking to him. So he talked back, and Balaam answered the donkey, "Because you have been making a fool of me. If I had been carrying a sword, I should have killed you by now." And the donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey, and have I not been your mount all your life? Have I ever behaved like this with you before?" "No," he replied. Yahweh then opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and threw himself on his face. You know, so that must have
And
been, yes.
Mike, I just want to make a small point. This idea of standing there with his sword drawn in his hand
Yes,
is also the same as Joshua chapter 5.
exactly. Yes,
He had his sword drawn in his hand at that time when he
yes.
gave Joshua the instructions to go march around the city.
I think I will get there in a few minutes. Yes, yes, because it's, uh, but you see here that you know, just to me, it's a little bit of a humorous interaction that Yahweh was making a point to Balaam that really must have humiliated him. That his donkey, not only could his donkey see the angel before he could, but the donkey had a intelligent conversation with him. You know, to me, it's kind of humorous. Anyway, okay, then the angel of Yahweh said to him, "Why did you strike your donkey 3 times like that? I myself had to come to bar your way. While I'm here, your road is blocked. The donkey saw me and turned aside because of me 3 times. You were lucky she did turn aside, or I would have killed you by now, though I would have spared her." So it was you know, Balaam was put in his place. But then we see here, Balaam said to the angel of Yahweh, "I have sinned. I did not know you were standing on the road to stop me. But if what I am doing displeases you, I will go home again." And the angel of Yahweh said to Balaam, "Go to these men, but say only what I tell you to say." So Balaam went on with the chiefs sent by Balak. So the angel is giving a message, directly speaking, you know, giving a message to the enemies of Israel. And okay, here's the angel of Yahweh made the covenant with Israel and led them through the wilderness. So the angel of Yahweh went up from Gilgal to Bethel and said, "I have brought you out of Egypt and led you into this country, which I promised on oath to your ancestors. I said, I shall never break my covenant with you." So here we see the angel of Yahweh right from the beginning, before they came out of Egypt, all the way until they entered the land in Book of Judges. This one is just, I like the nuances here. The angel of Yahweh appeared to Gideon. The angel of Yahweh came and sat under the terebinth, which is a type of tree, at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of Abiezer. Gideon, his son, was threshing wheat inside the winepress to keep it hidden from Midian. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him and said, "Yahweh is with you, valiant warrior." Gideon replied, "Excuse me, my lord, but if Yahweh is with us, why is all of this happening to us? And where are all of his miracles, which our ancestors used to tell us about when they said, 'Did not Yahweh bring us out of Egypt? But now Yahweh has deserted us. He has abandoned us to Midian.'" So right at this point, I can picture the man, you know, the angel of Yahweh appearing as a man underneath the terebinth tree. Says Yahweh turned to him. In other words, he, after hearing what Gideon said, he just turned his head to him, like, "What?" and said, go in this strength of yours, and you will rescue Israel from the power of Midian. Am I not sending you myself?" So I can just picture this angel sitting underneath the tree and interacting like almost with like, what are you saying? That Yahweh I've deserted you and abandoned you? What, are you kidding? So it's just a little inflection there. I can see like the angel of Yahweh was exasperated by I guess that would be the way to say it with Gideon's response. And this is also another very interesting uh, appearance of the angel of Yahweh appearing first to the mother of Samson in Judges 13 verse 2. There was a man of Zorah of the tribe of Dan called Manoah. His wife was barren. She had borne no children. The angel of Yahweh appeared to this woman and said to her, "You are barren and have no child, but you are going to conceive and give birth to a son." So, so as far as she knew, this was just a man that she was talking to, but he had a very striking presence. It says Manoah, let's see here. I thought I had a slide in between, but okay. Manoah went back with his wife, and she had told him where she had this experience, and there was that man again. And Manoah then pleaded with Yahweh and said, "I beg you, Lord Adonai here, let the man of God that you sent come to us again and instruct us what to do about the child when he is born." So this was a prayer that Manoah had, and Yahweh heard Manoah's prayer, and the angel of Yahweh visited the woman again while she was sitting in a field, and her husband Manoah was not with her. And the woman, okay, and then there's another appearance. The woman quickly ran and told her husband, "Look," she said, "the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me again." And Manoah got up, followed his wife, came to the man and said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" He replied, "I am." And they still didn't know that they were talking to the angel of Yahweh. So the angel of Yahweh replied to Manoah, "From everything that I forbade this woman, let her abstain. Let her swallow nothing that comes from the vine. Let her drink no wine or fermented liquor. Let her eat nothing unclean, and let her obey all the orders that I have given her." So Manoah and his wife invited this man to share a meal with them. Manoah said to the angel okay, I got the NIV here. The angel of Yahweh, we would like you to stay until we prepare a young goat for you. And the angel of Yahweh said to Manoah, "Even if you did detain me, I should not eat your food. But if you wish to prepare a burnt offering, offer it to Yahweh." Manoah then said to the angel of Yahweh, "What is your name, so that we may honor you when your words come true?" The angel of Yahweh replied, "Why ask my name? It is a name of wonder." Manoah then took the kid and the oblation and offered it on the rock as a burnt offering to Yahweh, the wonder worker. Manoah and his wife looked on. Now as the flame arose heavenwards from the altar, the angel of Yahweh ascended in this flame before the eyes of Manoah and his wife, and they fell face downwards on the ground. And after this, the angel of Yahweh did not appear any more to Manoah and his wife, but Manoah understood that this had been the angel of Yahweh. And Manoah said to his wife, "We are certain to die because we have seen God." His wife replied, "If Yahweh had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and oblation from us. he would not have let us see all this and at the same time have told us such things. So and I think that story of Samson's parents was very interesting in that at the Yahweh did not abandon Israel. Yahweh is always watching, and then gave them a deliverer, Samson, to help them overcome their enemies, even after they thought that, again, like Gideon did, that Yahweh had left them. And we see a number of things. I really think the period of the judges was probably the golden age of Israel, as opposed even to David's time, because it seemed like the people were much closer in their walk than during the time of the kings. Just personal opinion. Because as we see here, there was a not so pleasant experience with the angel of Yahweh coming up to the time of, this is time when David numbered Israel and did a census, whether it was to reflect on his own achievements and glory or whatever, but we see that it was displeasing to Yahweh. And so when verse 16, when the angel stretched his hand towards Jerusalem to destroy it, Yahweh felt sorry about the calamity and said to the angel who was destroying the people, "Enough now, hold your hand." The angel of Yahweh was standing by the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. And again, we can ask the question, well, was the angel who was destroying the people separate, distinct from the angel of Yahweh? But in verse 17, when David saw the angel who was ravaging the people, he said to Yahweh, "I was the one who sinned. I was the one who acted wrongly. But these, the flock, what have they done? Let your hand lie heavy on me and on my family." And I think that I should probably look at my time and just, I could go on more, but I should probably at this point just open it up strictly to questions. So I'll stop my screen and bring everybody back up.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Interesting point here where you just mentioned David saying that, "Let it fall on me and my family." This is some years after the Bathsheba incident, where he was already told the sword will never leave your family. So he's saying this in light of what's already been said to him, which makes it like, wow, you're really going to ask that it be on you when you already know you've got a curse?
Well,
it's really tough to think about that he would say such a thing.
Every time I read through these instances, I see more and more about the personal interaction and the feeling, the emotions that those that that are experiencing these things, the various emotions that they had, and and looking at it from what are the feelings of all parties on all sides, because it's definitely emotional. Okay, let me bring up, let's see. Okay, Mark, I'll look in the chat. It'll, okay. Okay, first let's look at Isaiah 44 verse 8. I can bring up the Septuagint. And then we could proceed down through more. Okay. Oh boy. Isaiah 44:8. Okay. I'll bring it up and then share screen. Okay, I'll share my screen here. Oh, it's giving me so many screens to see. Okay, I think I have it here. Okay. The top one is JPS and KJV, then LXE is English translation of Septuagint. And if I scroll down, I can bring up the Hebrew or the actual Greek, Septuagint in the Greek language. So we see in the JPS, I use the NJB, but also the JPS uses rock, but the King James doesn't. And we see in the Septuagint, there is no word rock in the Septuagint. And I'll scroll down to, let's see, which one do I? Okay, and if we wanted to go through that, we can see that there's no word rock popping up in the definitions, but we'll go through word by word. Okay, witness, you can stay, live. Now, if we go to Hebrew, we see dread awe. Conspicuous. Particle conjunction. Okay, here we go. I'll just check the others to make sure, but there's sur is the word for rock in Hebrew. Elohim. Yeah, without besides. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's pretty safe to conclude that all the Masoretic text-based translations are going to come up with rock. And so
Yes.
we looked at the Brenton because that's the Septuagint to English, and
Yes.
it doesn't have it. So,
Yes.
but that's just one verse. I mean, you went on for verse after verse after verse. So, I mean, it's just one verse. You have to do all of them that way. You know what I mean?
Well, that's exactly, it is if you really dig into it. So that's why I'm calling this presentation an introduction, because I realized just to get into the body, it's really good to double check everything, and then to look at the just look at the original language, because here we see sori, so that's a noun, common, masculine, plural construct, with the suffix first person common singular. So I like to look at the grammar. So this would be a plural in majesty. So because in Hebrew, the way they show, one way they show greatness is through plurality. And so this would be a plural of majesty. In other words, like in all caps, rock in all caps, the rock in a sense. So by being the plural construct, just like Elohim, it doesn't mean plural of number always. It's plural of majesty is how they say it in the Hebrew grammar. And say, we have the same thing in English, where we use a plural form for a singular, a single word. Say like species. That would be in a plural form, but when we talk about species, we're talking about a single species.
Well, I think the one to look up is the verse to look at is the New Testament verse where Paul writes the rock was Christ. And we immediately in our minds say the rock was Jesus. But if the rock was Christ, he could be saying the rock was anointed. So you could bring that up, and we have to look at that pretty hard too.
Well,
the idea that Yahweh is the rock, the Lord is my rock and my salvation. That probably really says Yahweh is my rock and my salvation. That probably doesn't actually say the Lord. We just think that
right.
because of our English Bible.
Exactly. And so what we need is a multitude of witnesses, and then and actually, my observation from all of this is how we have different disagreeing denominations, because some people see the same thing one way and other people say the same set of data another way, depending upon how they process data. And so that's why I'm not saying, well, thus saith the Lord, this is the only right doctrine. I think what we can all do is just keep learning and being friends, just couple, and learning as we share different points of view, hopefully. And so, yes.
I'll still be your friend, even if you are wrong.
See, thank you. I'm hoping that we can all be that way. And because I process information one way, and another personality type uses a whole different way to process information.
Need something?
Uh-oh, somebody knocked the door down.
Ooh.
Yeah, and we all process information with a great set of presuppositions and the lenses that we view everything through. So
Yes.
It's something we bring to the table before we even gather the data.
Well, and especially when we're talking about the transcendent being who created all things and is larger than our whole universe in scope, the transcendence of our Elohim, it's Elohim in that sense is plural of majesty. So when we talk about the Elohim who inhabits the whole universe, that is then how does this same Elohim who is such great majesty interact with us in our dimension? Because obviously the spirit realm is a total separate dimension from our physical realm, with some level, some level of interface. There's an interface between the spirit realm and our physical realm, And that interface is what we're looking at. How does us, the spiritual realm interact with our physical realm? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, but even the physical
Alan-
realm interfaces, because the verses like such as Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2, I think it says, where he upholds all things by the word of his power. It's because
Yes.
he fills the universe in the material world, not even getting to the fact that humans are spiritual beings on the inside. So
That's the other aspect, yes.
there's already the aspect of the earth is filled with his glory already.
Yes.
So Alan,
And
when you're talking about
Go ahead, Chris. Did you have a question? Chris, turn on your mic.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
well, I stopped talking.
Okay. All right, Mike, I'm done with
Yeah.
my rant.
Well, no, this is the thing, and this is where I feel that as believers, it's good for us just to keep listening and learning, and we can, have our points of view, and but the Roman Catholic Church killed people because they didn't follow their exact formula for the Trinity, the quote unquote Trinity. They killed people. And when you get back to the Chaldean ecumenical conference that they had, or the Chalcedon conference they had, the Eastern churches did not change their belief. They had their belief that they had for the previous couple hundred years, and they were disfellowshipped because they didn't change with the Chalcedon conference. That's the way it was with all of the ecumenical conferences. Okay, we're changing the doctrine, and if you don't agree with us, we'll kill you.
Oh, yeah, but those days are over. That will never happen again.
Yeah, sure. That's the
But
thing.
they
is,
never, historically, none of these people, if you look at all of the doctrines, because it wasn't even a Trinity in 325. It didn't become a Trinity till like 4 something. But
right.
At no point did they ever think that Yeshua and Yahweh were the same being. They even to this day, the Catholic profession of faith declares them separate beings, but made of the same homoousia, the same substance.
Yes.
So that's the problem we have today, is that the Trinity has been morphed into something where people think that Yahweh actually died, which is impossible.
Well, see,
Right? I mean,
what we have, we're post Roman Catholic, because the Roman Catholics changed the doctrine from what the Orthodox held earlier, in their first 7 conferences. So I was just talking with a friend who converted from Baptist to Eastern Orthodox, and we brought up the differences in the Trinity doctrine between the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox even, and how the Roman Catholic divided the Father and the Son into 2 gods more,
But Chris, excuse me, the thing is though, every day when they say their prayer to Mary, they say Mary, Mother of God. They're thinking Yahweh. That's what they're saying when they say that prayer to Mary.
Right. See, these are all things that, I had a discussion a few feasts ago with our Hebrew teacher from college, Mark Kaplan, and I like to attend the feasts, and we were talking about the evolution of the Trinity doctrine, and how it's so different now from when it was in the earlier years with the Greek Orthodox Church, that it's morphed tremendously from that time. And every time they make a change, they kill everybody that disagrees with them. Well, what's that?
What do you think? What are you saying was? What are you saying is early? Because the actual Trinity itself doesn't even exist till 4 something.
Well, the questions. If I kind of made a study of this, and the question that they had at the Council of Nicaea was whether Yeshua, Jesus in the Greek, was a created being or existed from eternity. And that's all that they discussed. And the Bishop Arius held that Yeshua was a created being. And the other side was that Yeshua existed from eternity. And that was the first step in the formulation of the Trinity. And the point that they had at that time was that Yeshua was a human manifestation of Yahweh, not that they were two separate persons. And then
But Paul says both things. Paul says that Yeshua is the firstborn of all creations.
yes.
So he's a created being that existed from eternity.
Well, in the Greek, monogenes, you're talking about the Greek word monogenes, right? The firstborn?
No. Well, I thought monogenous was the one was somewhere else, but he's the firstborn of all creation.
Only begotten.
Which Greek word? Protokokos?
You're saying monogenes is only begotten. You're jumping to John 3:16. I was talking about where Paul says that Jesus is the firstborn of all creation. Through him all things were made. I mean, it's pretty clear that Paul believes that Yeshua was a created being from the beginning of the universe.
Well, and others see it that that's their proof text that he was not created, but that he was born as the first of the first fruits.
Oh, no, that's a different one.
That's
The firstborn of the dead. That's a different passage. Yes.
no.
He is the firstborn of the dead.
This one here. My point is that people use the same scriptures and come up with different conclusions.
Yeah.
So my purpose
Yeah,
is
I know
just
that.
not to come to a doctrinal conclusion, but I think we're all interested in what everybody's thinking. So I am not coming to a doctrinal conclusion here. I'm just wanting everybody to bring up their points of view. So you won't get an answer out of me on any of this.
Oh yeah, Chris and
I said what Paul believes. I said that Paul wrote that Yeshua is the firstborn of all creation. Through him all things were made.
Yes.
I mean, I don't.
No.
That's what Paul believes. I believe it because Paul wrote that.
Hello?
Okay, but what Mike said is he's not going to make a statement, so I'd like to, as a piece of clay, call Paul, Mike, and all of us clay, and can we really understand who the potter is in our own clay minds? I think it's good to try to get as close to him as we can, but whenever we try to define him and say we know more than someone else who he is, that's when we start dividing and killing each other. And that's not what he wants.
Well, but the doctrine is important because what Paul taught, remember that we just went over this with Timothy, that book is about him admonishing Timothy on what to be. And he said, beware of the doctrine that you've been taught, because it'll not only save your life, it'll save the life of those that hear it. So Paul wanted to make sure that Timothy didn't deviate as a minister. And remember, he said to beware of diverse and strange doctrines. And doctrine is very important, and it's life-saving. If the scripture says he who has the Son has life, and he who has not the Son of God has not life, you better pay attention, and you better have it right. because if you don't believe, that's the thing with this oneness, and Chris and all of our group, we sit there and talk about the importance, and Chris Bridges was thinking, I'm starting to see, that there's a lot of scriptures, and I started seeing this later on, that, man, there's a lot of life and death in that belief. And Yeshua said, if you don't believe I am he, you're going to die in your sins. And if you die in your sins, the wrath of God, it says, abides on you. And if the wrath of God abides on you, it's not going to turn out well for you. So their beliefs, what you believe, all you have that saves you is a belief. He who believes that Yahshua is the Son of Yahweh has the witness in himself. And that's where it leads into, he that has the Son has life. So doctrines, there's certain small things, we shouldn't be arguing about. But the basic of who the Son of God is, we all need to agree that he's the Son. He's not, because if you think Yahshua is Yahweh, you've lost your mediator. And I think we talked about the last time that was on there. And that's what the scripture, that's not what me and Mark's saying. The scripture says that you have to have the Son. We don't have forgiveness of sins unless you have the mediator to mediate between God and ourselves for us. His Son died for us, just like Chris was saying. The people that think that Yahweh died, that's blasphemy. Because God can't die.
The thing is, Mark, the thing is that and what happened with us was oneness believers, not scripture seekers, but there's a oneness doctrine that's pretty new, right?
No, that's very old. That's very old. It goes way back to that was one of the original points argued at the conferences in 300 and 400.
Really?
But
yes.
But the idea of the oneness, that they're actually the same being, would make all the scriptures about Yeshua being the mediator null and void. But even more than that, the Jews had to have rejected somebody. And if Yeshua actually is Yahweh, then they didn't reject him.
The point that I'd like to bring up now is in the languages, and I'm currently reading the Aramaic New Testament as well as the texts, the early texts, and some of the translations, like the scriptures. You're familiar with that, Chris, right? This one called the scripture.
That's not a translation. It's not a translation, but yeah, I'm familiar with it. But yeah,
it's very flawed. Okay, then you're not.
Right.
You'll agree with me. Where it uses the Yahweh and in the New Testament, it transliterates.
Right, and that's a very difficult thing to do.
It's just plain inaccurate, because the word Yahweh is used, but it's Maria, which is one of the ways, but that's like similar to Adonai, it's without saying the sacred name. They had the custom at that time not to pronounce the sacred name. So where Maria in Aramaic would be referring to Yahweh, and they missed that on all points.
Did you see? I'd like to answer Marlene. She wrote questions.
Well, let her talk, because we keep stepping on her. So what?
Okay.
If us bulldogs could stop talking.
I'm gonna take a bathroom break. I'll check out and be right back.
No,
and
Chris said she couldn't talk.
I'll try to.
Whoop. Is everybody still there?
I'm still here.
Go here.
Hey, Mark. You mentioned Timothy a few minutes ago, right? One of the things that Paul points out to Timothy is that, beware of false doctrines, beware of the crazy things and stuff like that. But to remember what he was taught. We have to remember that he didn't have Paul's letters in the gospel to be taught from. He learned from Torah.
Yeah.
And the Tanakh.
That's true.
Right? I think it's a very important thing. That's why we've all been doing this. In our congregation has been going back to the beginning and understanding, the foundations and stuff. the answer to this question about who Yeshua is, it begins at the beginning. You know, even before he's born, before he's begotten, because we have to understand, in order to understand the different relationships between Yeshua and Yahweh and the Holy Ghost and the angel of God and all these different things that we talk about, we got to get Yahweh right first. All right, and it makes it a lot harder to, we can't get that part of the equation correct. That's supposed to be remember, he's the rock, right? He's the foundation. He's the focal point that we need to be building from. And I think this is the problem they had in the first couple of centuries, that why they had all these different problems about understanding and arguing back and forth. Is Yeshua divine? Is he a created being? Is he always existent? And all these different kinds of things. It's because everything was focusing on just who Yeshua was, forgetting there's a context that he comes into. He didn't come out of thin air. He was who he was defined before he got here, because that's the whole point of being the Messiah. The point of having the prophecies and all those things coming in.
Okay, but can you hear me now?
Is that Marlene?
You able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
That's just right here.
That's great. Okay.
You can't use it, or there's nothing in it?
We can hear you, Marlene. You have the floor.
Okay, great. I mentioned that I had a question about 1:4.
Yeah.
Where it says, having become as much superior to the angels as a name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. And it goes on to say, which of the angels did he say, you are my son? And it goes on more about, why did he even talk about comparing the son to angels? Is my first question. Why even bring that up?
Well, because remember the scripture says that he was made a little lower than the angels. Made, of course, being agreeing with Chris, is created. But they were made subject to him. Because when he brings the first begotten into the world, he said, "Let all the angels of God worship him." Now, Chris, is that worship word again? Is that the obedience?
In Greek, as far as I know, and I'm sure we should wait for Mike to come back because he's got the languages down, but the worship is proskuneo, which whenever I look at it, it can mean worship as in worshiping the Almighty, but it could also mean worship as in rendering a salute to an officer, or as giving respect to a nobleman. It's a pretty broad word as far as that goes. If it's that word.
Yeah, because it obviously says, when he bringeth in the first begotten, when he brought him into the world, he saith, "Let all the angels of God worship him." That's what they did at the crib, right? Weren't the angels all the way around when
right. And they did, yeah. But Mike, you're back. Marlene asked about Hebrews 1:4 and asking, if about the son being superior to the angels. So I was wondering if you wanted to get in on that one.
Well, yes, actually, those verses are used equally by different sides of arguments to prove their point. And so that one, you need to compare and contrast with other scriptures, because if everybody's using the same verse to prove their own separate point, it needs more. And I have, if anybody's interested, I have 2 more Bible study presentations on this subject. That's why I'm calling this an introduction. And then with my own Aramaic studies, that actually puts a whole another twist on a lot of these things. And just going back to the language that they was the universal language in the Middle East, we could go back to the Targums, which would be the Old Testament Aramaic, which they use in their discussion period at their synagogue service, or the Aramaic translations that were, see, all of the Greek was translated into Aramaic, like they really wanted to read all of Paul's letters in the Eastern churches, so the letters that were written in Greek were translated to Aramaic, so you have actually two witnesses to narrow in. And that's why this is an introduction, and if anybody's interested in more, I have a bunch more, but it's a little tedious to go through it verse by verse, and it's opening up a large subject, and I think it's good from, I think the worldwide Church of God would be categorized as a subordinationist, bi-theistic point of view. And that's where, even though they agree with I've always said to people, the worldwide Church of God was well within the Trinity definitions of the Nicene and the Ephesus conferences, and then a whole lot of other, the Eastern churches were ruled out, by the time we got to the fourth, and so then there was more evolution, through time. So to call some, to paint, say, Trinitarianism with the broad stroke, there's numerous definitions of the Trinity, right down to tritheism, which there's three guys in heaven, which is the main picture that modern Trinitarians have.
Well, Mike, my interpretation of the Trinity doctrine is a pontification, a very broadly written doctrine to try to get everybody to get along. I think they tried to craft a position to where if you believe that they were two, you'd be okay. If you believe there were three, you'd be okay. I think it's even even the Catechism itself calls it a mystery. So they don't even say that it's
actually it divided out into subgroups through time. It started out as a very monotheistic, almost a oneness position, and then went to kind of degraded down into modern times of tritheism, which is actually, tritheism is actually the official position of the Mormon Church. They think it's three guys up there, and they state it that way in their doctrines.
I don't know. I just try to stick with what the scriptures say.
Yeah.
He's seated at the right hand of the Father. So there's the Father,
the Aramaic,
Yeshua sits at the right hand of it.
The Aramaic puts a very interesting, distinctive twist. In other words, the Greek translated to the English is different than the Greek, and it's different than, again, from the Aramaic. But that goes back to the Hebrew, because that phrase is used throughout the Tanakh, the right hand. But yeah, I'm not saying I got her figured out. I think it's good for us, because the worldwide Church of God was not a mainstream belief, as the Arian point of view, definitely not mainstream, but all have significant points, and so as two outcasts, two outcast groups here sharing with each other. The main thing is not to realize that we're not enemies to each other, but we're, we can put it all together and come to greater understandings individually without compromising anything scripturally, as we all learn more. I think hopefully that's, without shooting at each other, but we have to realize we're two sets of outcasts here, and we were considered heretics by almost everybody else.
I don't think you can even discuss the Trinity and not be called a heretic. I mean, that's the wall. That's the walls that have been built over time, right? That you can't talk about it, right? I mean,
I had one friend that actually, she was part of a singles group, and she was valedictorian of her class, and this is the type of person that got up every morning at 5 a.m. and did her scripture studies. A typical, a theologian type diligent person. And she said to me that because she heard, not from what I said, but what she heard about, us Armstrongites, I guess, in the cult books, is that we were not Trinitarians. So I'd bring up any point about it, and she said, well, I can't disagree with you on anything that you're saying, but somehow you're wrong.
yeah, that's how it ends a lot of times, man. But our group, for all of you guys out there, we don't agree on this topic. So it sounds like it when we all get on here because but when we get around our own round table, it gets pretty interesting. But we're a unique assembly that people can come in, and I mean, we're definitely not a Trinitarian assembly, but anybody can get along with us. You know what I mean? It's all open game, because I don't personally think that this is settled. When you were talking about Genesis 18, I think that's the one where Yahweh's talking to Yahweh. Yahweh calls down fire from Yahweh. That doesn't make any sense.
And that's actually a very interesting translation in the Aramaic Targums of that, and that very point is discussed by Philo back from the 1st century. So yeah, that's a very interesting subject to pursue. And what I see is a lot of people just know what, have a vague idea of what their, air quotes, church taught, but they're not familiar with the scriptures behind it. So I think the more that we all get into it, especially, from our worldwide Church of God background, most people were pretty ignorant of scripture. They just knew what the booklets, what the pastor said. So I keep trying to bring up things to, encourage people just to keep reading. And I know, like, I'm a German, of a Gothic roots, and the Germans were big Aryan type, point of view. And if you go back to their Gothic translation, was it Bishop Theodosius? He actually translated a Bible into the Gothic language way before Martin Luther did to the German. And so I've had a little bit of an interesting study going back into the Proto-Gothic languages and connecting them back to the Sumerian and the Akkadian. And so, my ancestors were quite the Aryan from the Aryan point of view. And a lot of people don't even know that the barbarians that sacked Rome were Aryan type Christians. They weren't pagans, they were Christians. And they were just so disgusted with all the idol worship in Rome and all the statues and the degeneracy that they were a little bit of a correction to the Romans, and put all the idols out of Rome for a while. That they were not pagans, they were Christian believers. And most of the Sabbatarians through history were also, some say Unitarian, some say Arian. Everybody has a little different point of view, but they were definitely non-Trinitarian, through time.
Athanasius at Nicaea, he was a Sabbatarian. So it was continuing on even by that 4th century.
Yes. But the Now, the German churches at that time, there were churches in Germany, and they followed Bishop Arius and their theology.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to kind of go back to what Chris was saying about Genesis 18, Yahweh calling down fire from Yahweh. I was looking at that earlier as you were talking, Mike, and I was going through here, and I think that actually he thinks in Genesis 19, that's where he calls fire down for Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 18, before that, he's talking, it says to three angels, three men, and it comes as men. I think this is kind of a proof text in a way to explain what it is we're trying to talk about. We talk about the angel of Yahweh, right? It's using these terms and these phrases interchangeably because, as we were saying before, Yahweh isn't limited to this dimension of existence, right? He's over and above. He's transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
So in Genesis 18, it talks about those three. It calls them three men at one point. It calls them three angels at one point. It specifically says Yahweh speaks at another point. All of that story. So I think it needs to be assumed and understood that when for the most part anyway, when it talks about Yahweh said, it's referring to his messenger. His messenger comes and speaks in his name and his voice. That's what the point of the prophets are as well. And that's what the word angel means. The angel means messenger.
Yes.
So,
yes. And those are good things to point out because, it's something I dwell on is how, getting to the say, even quantum physics is 100% material world. And so when we talk about the spiritual aspect, say if you look at an interface area between the spirit realm, say the spirit realm to one side and the physical realm to the other, we as humans, we have aspects of both. We have a human spirit as well as we're physical beings. And so now with Elohim, I'll just say, the broadest term, is primarily, and our whole reality is primarily a spiritual reality. And our physical realm is just a subset of the spiritual greater reality. So even in quantum physics, they mathematically predict either 10 or 11 different dimensions besides our 3 dimensions, and they talk about time as being a 4th dimension. And so we have different dimensions that our 5 senses are totally unaware of. And we as believers, we realize there is such a thing as a spiritual dimension, which the scientists would refute. They say, oh, there's no such thing. But it's just obvious. We as humans are spiritual beings. We are a spirit. We have a spirit. But now, when our Creator interacts, our Creator is primarily within a realm which is totally unknown to us physical beings, and He reaches into our realm. I believe there's that interface where we have, we have dreams and visions. We have, thoughts that will pop into our head that are, maybe inspired. There is that interface area between the total spiritual realm and the physical realm. And how this all happens is a good question, but as a believer, I believe that there's a spiritual to physical interface, which we have 1 foot in the spiritual realm, which scientists again would refute, but as believers, we know that we have a human spirit. There is a dimension to us that is spiritual. And so we have the transcendence of God, that He's outside of our physical universe and greater than, and we don't know how much greater than. And even if we're talking about Yeshua being created, well, was it billions of years before, trillions of years, quintillions of years? It's beyond our scope of comprehension even to know the spiritual realities. And but yet our Creator, our Elohim, in the plural of majesty sense, sees fit to interface and interact with us personally. And that's like, wow. Like David said, you inhabit the whole universe. How is it even possible that you could come and dwell in our little stone building here? But yet the Shekinah glory dwelt in Jerusalem in a stone building, at the same time as being transcendent to the whole universe. To me, it's like, wow.
I have, that Genesis 18 was brought up, and here's kind of how I look at it. I go back to 1 Samuel 3:7, and 1 Samuel 3:7 says, "Now Samuel did not yet know, I'll say Jehovah, neither was the word of Jehovah yet revealed unto him." And then go to the end of that chapter, verse 21. "And Jehovah appeared again in Shiloh, for Jehovah revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of Jehovah." And then I go back to Genesis 18:18, or Genesis 18:1, and it says, "And Jehovah appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre," but that appeared can also mean look down upon. So then, if Jehovah looked down upon him, and he sent his son, and who was the messenger of his presence, so he's an angel in the sense that he is a messenger also. And so when he said, "My Lord," and that's of course where, that's one of the spots where Companion Bible puts in 3068, Jehovah, and but the King James has "My Lord" 136, my master type of a thing. And personally, my thought is that it actually fits more like my master. That Bollinger is probably wrong in thinking that it's supposed to be 3068. So
if you could give me the verse, I can look it up in the Hebrew.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know, but depending on who figures what, that was.
I have the Hebrew text of the Masoretic, not a translation. Yes. Which verse was that again?
That's 18 verse 3.
Genesis.
Yes.
The Lord is, yeah.
Okay, and then I'll pop that up on the screen. I think this is the right one here. Everybody see the Bible works? (18) verse 3, right? And,
right.
Okay, here is the Hebrew. So it's Amir. Okay.
It's Don.
Adonai. Amir Adonai. So this is Adonai. My Lord is my Adonai. And with ending, being an E, it's in the plural, which you could, depending on the context, it could be plural of majesty or plural of number. So Tanakh says my lords, because the Jewish point of view is this was three men or three angels with no distinction between them. And so the Tanakh says lords, whereas the others say capital, my Lord, as a, from the plural of majesty. and so it's translated in different ways. But now, if we wanted to go back and parse this out, the key is singular. Okay, then we have a plural, and then we have singular. So according to the technical rules of grammar, this here is Adonai is a plural of majesty and not plural of number, according to their own rules. So but they obscure that there was any connection to they wanted to make it 3 angels only, so they translated it differently here than what the technical Hebrew should be.
But this is one of the places where it really does say Lord. A
Yes.
lot of times when it says Lord, it's really the Yod He Vav He. It's really the tetragram. But this is one of the places to answer James's question where he was right. It should be more like master,
Right.
not.
It's Adonai, right straight up. It's Adonai, not the
Not.
tetragrammaton, right? Yeah.
So the answer to the question from 10 minutes ago is yes.
I also think, I also like Acts 3:13. And it says the Elohim of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob, the Elohim of our fathers, has glorified his, now it's either son or servant, Jeshua,
Yep.
whom you delivered up and denied him in the presence of Pilate, etc. But so it's who is the mighty one of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the fathers, and he, whoever he was, glorified his son.
Yep.
So in other words, I put that as Jehovah, or you would say Yahweh.
Yep.
And I would say the Father.
We got that.
Well, then in the other version that we don't have, it says something else, right? I'm poking fun at you, man.
Are we talking?
This is where Mike uses. This is
the
where Mike
Aramaic?
said, yeah. Oh, the Aramaic or some other unobtainable, thing that we don't have on here. It says some other thing, right?
Oh, well, I could bring up the Aramaic quickly. If you can read Aramaic in the Syriac script. I like the Aramaic Bible that I have in the block letters because I can read the block letters. It's the same as the Hebrew. But the Syriac or the Arabic script, I don't know that so well. So then I have to cross-reference it with my script. But yeah, to me, it's very interesting to read it in the original languages. And then if you go back to the Old Testament, I like to look it up in the Paleo Hebrew also, because that had no, that was one letter after the other. There was no words really at that time, no space between the letters. And so it's actually a pictographic language, like the Egyptian hieroglyph. Hebrew had pictographs, and they went from one picture to the next, kind of like the Chinese do. And
yeah, but Mike, is there actually a Torah written in that?
Yes, the Samaritan. Okay. The Samaritan has the one that they've always used, and then some of I'm a member of a pictograph Paleo Hebrew group, and they pull up the ancient archaeological scripts.
Well, we had Jeff Benner and Eric Bissell, who are the experts on that, the Paleo Ox thing, come, and they didn't bring a Paleo Hebrew Torah with them. The oldest fragments that I'm aware of would be the stuff from the Qumran, where there's a few of those things, and most of it is in the Ashuri, right? Or the Ivri. Ashuri is what we have now. There's the Ivri, and then there's the Paleo. I was unaware that there was a Paleo Hebrew Torah.
They use it every day in northern Israel. Yes. We call them the Samaritans, but they're if you look up Samaritan Jews, the Jews would never consider them being Jews, because they're Samaritans, spit. But yeah,
So this is post-Babylon, but there are people who trace their history post-Babylon have a Bible that's older than anybody else.
Well, what the story is when the 10 tribes were taken up to into the area of the Medes, as is recorded, and they transported some local people that lived, a local tribe. I believe they're kind of distinguished genetically as the Druze now, but they were of non-Israelite genetics. And when the non-Israelites came into the land of Israel, they were terrified by the wild beasts always attacking them, and just one thing after the other, one tragedy after the other. So they went back.
I know this story, but
yeah,
but I have never heard everybody I've seen who talks about the Paleo Hebrew. Basically, it comes down to the words mean whatever they say it means. I've never known there to be a Torah that you could lay right next to the Masoretic text and see word for word what means what.
Yeah, there is.
My email is chris@firstcenturychristianity.net. Would you please email that to me?
Okay, I'll get you connected. Yeah, because I've gone back and compared the texts, and there are a few differences between the texts.
How many books of the Tanakh are in the ancient script?
Oh no, they do not believe in the Tanakh. They only believe in Torah, so they only use the Torah.
So, okay, this is shocking information. I was not aware that there was a Torah that was any older than the Masoretic text. I thought the oldest complete Torah was the Septuagint.
No, Septuagint is a paraphrase.
You're telling me there is a Torah that is older than the Septuagint?
Yes. Yeah, actually, the group that translated the Septuagint, that was commissioned by Ptolemy, and the Onias IV was the Zadokite priest who was deposed by Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the oldest brother in their family, and Antiochus put in his younger brother and renamed him a Greek name, Jason. But then Ptolemy, I think it was Ptolemy II, invited, he gave sanctuary to Onias IV and offered to make a translation of the Tanakh into Greek because they wanted to read it in Greek. He was quite the philosophic king. And then they built a temple in Heliopolis in the land of Goshen. And then Onias continued the Zadokite priesthood there in Egypt, and they followed the Essene way with following the Book of Enoch, and they had the Enochian solar calendar. So there's a number of scholars that believe that the oldest calendar was the Enochian solar calendar, and that the Jews brought back the lunar calendar from Babylon, which I don't believe that's true because I see the lunar calendar, from times, David talked about following the lunar calendar.
But the oldest book of Enoch is younger than the Septuagint. And we were talking about there is no book of Enoch that's older than the Septuagint. That's why it's not in the Septuagint, right? Right?
Well, no.
You're telling me that there is a Torah, a complete Torah in the pictogram, and I spent hours looking for that because we heard some charlatans come and tell us that it says behold nail, behold hand, when it doesn't say that. It says hand behold, nail behold. They were reading it from left to right, even though they had the they had the Tetragrammaton up in Hebrew, in what they called the ancient Hebrew, and they were saying, look, it says behold nail, behold hand, and they were going from left to right.
Of course.
And
That's
so I
silly.
went looking for because I needed a glossary. These people were teaching us things as if they had the secret knowledge, and
The language that they were promoting is called Hebrewish. Hebrewish.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Right. But so if
That's-
there is an actual Torah that uses the little ox and the door and the squiggly line,
Yeah.
I would really, really like to see that.
Oh, it's
Like
interesting.
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm currently just taking some online courses from Brenner. But I'm just the basic.
Brenner.
I'm working on Jeff
Jeff Binner, who does not
yes.
have that on his website.
Right.
What you just said exists is not on Jeff Binner's website.
Right. Well, he's I like him. He's a good teacher. But yeah, there's quite a history behind the Samaritan sect, as well as even a more recently, pre-modern history, because they were during the Ottoman Empire, they were subject of genocide, just like some of the other Christians and Jewish groups, and so there aren't a lot of them, but they still worship on Mount Gerizim, and they still slaughter the Passover lamb on Mount Gerizim, and even though they're a small group, and their DNA does test out to be Levitical DNA, just like with the Cohen modal haplotype. But their story actually goes back to when Jeroboam was prophesied that he would be, that he would be made leader over the northern tribes, and because of the corruption of Rehoboam, and they have a whole history based upon why they don't follow anything after the book of Judges. They look at the Judges as historical, but they view the whole history of Israel from the time of David as being heretical. And it's all a very interesting story. And then if you compare their Torah text, there are some places where it's a little closer to the Septuagint, and other places but there's only like a handful of disagreements. And that okay, we would say they added, but they have a few extra words in, like the appointed place. There's only one place that's appointed to do sacrifices, and then they add in at Mount Gerizim, stuff like that. But otherwise, it's very much the same. And but then you also, if you study it more, you'll see you can compare and contrast that to the ancient Phoenician, because Abraham took on the language. He came from the Akkadian area, so with Ur of the Chaldees, that was up in Turkey, and they would have used the cuneiform. The Akkadian was a cuneiform alphabet.
Right. And what you're talking about is, I mean, I don't think I have the time to study as much as you have, but I've done some stuff, and all of the scholarly works that I've looked at use the ancient Ugaritic language to translate the Ivri script.
Yes.
I am very shocked to find out that there's actually the Paleo. Are you calling the Paleo the one where the yod looks like a sideways rake?
Yeah.
Some people call that Paleo. That's not Paleo. Paleo is when it has a little ox, the pictogram, right? That's Ivri, and what we have today is a Shuri. But people call that paleo, even though it's not, even though paleo is actually the actual hieroglyphic one.
Do you know Alan Horvath?
No.
Okay, he really gets into the paleo, but he might be one of the Heblish guys. I'm not sure. I've been reading a few of his things, and he really loves the paleo but
Right, but everybody loses their mind when they find paleo stuff at Qumran, right? So that's why when you're telling me there's a complete paleo Torah somewhere, right? It's all over the news, the Jewish news and the Messianic news. Whatever they found the Book of Esther recently, right? And everybody's like, woohoo! They found the Book of Esther. So I'm really anxious to see an actual Torah in the ancient hieroglyph looking thing.
Well, I think the thing with the stigma with because there's a stigma that the Samaritans were not a valid Jewish religion, and that they were
but
all
when the same scholars look at Ugarit, they look at an ancient pagan society that did exactly what an ancient Canaanite society that was supposed to be smote, that didn't get smote, right? So why would that have more value than the Samaritan? You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of it's just a stigma that the Samaritans aren't valid in our culture, but they exist. They have their own Torah, and it's Paleo Hebrew. So people might say, "Oh, that's nothing." It's because they're spit Samaritans. They're no good. But I think Yeshua looked upon the Samaritans in a more favorable light than the Pharisee.
And we should too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the point is before we see the first Gentile being baptized, and there was all sorts of Samaritans baptized before the first Gentile was. So just by innuendo, that shows, well, I guess by default, it shows that many of the Samaritans were Israelites. There was a subgroup of non-Israelite Samaritans, but the observant Samaritans, the Torah observant Samaritans were descended from the tribes, and they had true Levitical priests at Mount Gerizim.
Cool.
All along, which if you look at the history, when they came back from Babylon even, and the whole drama between the Samaritans and the returning Jews, the story about the pagan wives. See, Manasseh, the priest Manasseh, had married the daughter of Sanballat, and so rather than give up his wife, he joined Sanballat, and they continued their own worship at Mount Gerizim. And then if you look at the Syene documents from Upper Egypt, they were wanting to have their own temple there at about that time, and they went back and forth between Ezra, Nehemiah, and Sanballat and Manasseh about who they could get permission from to which group would support them building their own temple. And that's all recorded in the Syene documents from the Elephantine Island. You probably heard of that. But yeah, there's enough documentation about the personalities involved in the rivalry between the Samaritans and the Judeans.
Cool.
Yeah, so I just think it's that the Samaritans were not considered as being valid is why they're not looked at more. But I can forward to you information.
I'm actually looking at it now.
Okay.
It's not. It's kind of like what they call Paleo Hebrew, but it doesn't look the same to me. But
Right, because like you say, there is
but
different
it's not.
dialect.
But
See-
it's not the pictogram. It's definitely not the pictogram with the ox and the stick and the snake and the. It's not that at all. It's more like Ivri. It's closer to
Which
Ivri.
is actually probably like you're saying, the actual real paleo.
Right. It's what people call it. Looks like what people call paleo, but yeah.
Yeah.
All righty.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it's been nice talking to you while all of our friends listen. Maybe somebody else would like to talk. You
Well,
never know.
I'm glad we got through to a resolution where you found the reference. That's good.
And speaking
Yeah,
of this, the
I thought this
whole,
was awesome. Y'all keep on going. It was great.
Michael, Jim here,
Okay.
and anybody else who wants to chime in too. I was just, I look at Proverbs 8, which has a headline in the King James like, wisdom.
Yes.
But I look at it as actually just talking about the sun in there from verses like 21 or 23 to 31 or so. And I just wondered what you had what your thoughts were on anything like that.
Well, actually, in reading the ancient Jewish writers, the philosophers, it's very distinctly was considered by just the early, the 1 to 200 BC period, especially in the Egyptian area. They connected that with the feminine aspect of the divine, and so it's within certain Jewish groups, they identify Proverbs 8 as speaking of the Holy Spirit, which they consider the feminine aspect of the divine, not the Son or the Word. And if you look at the grammar, you'll see that there's a reason for that, because of the feminine words, the feminine gender of the words. So it's a later idea of looking at. Okay, I'll long as I'm on it, I'll expand it out, because that temple in Egypt was different than the Jerusalem temple, and they had a whole different theology, you might say. And then that area of Egypt was also the origin of the Hermetical philosophies. And so that's why the Ptolemies were so interested in all religions. And so there was a real productive period where they developed a lot of the Hermetic philosophies, which we see nowadays as the Freemason religion, because Freemasons combine all the religions. And if you look at the word Baphomet and use Jeremiah code, or the ciphering, switching around the Hebrew letters, Baphomet actually using that code reads Sophia, which would be the Greek word for wisdom. So it's using the Jeremiah cipher when they were, translating a lot of things into Septuagint. The greater people, the greater, the scholars that were in Egypt intermingled a lot of the Hebrew Bible with their Hermetic teachings, as well as, combining it with all the world religions. And so they viewed it would be more like Philo, and and the other Jewish philosophers that weren't Orthodox. They intermingled the philosophies of Sophia, and they attributed Proverbs chapter 8 as being descriptive of the goddess Sophia, connecting that, which would go back to the Easter. Ishtar was the Babylonian predecessor to Sophia, and that became a lot of the Catholic early church fathers intermingled a lot of the pagan concepts with their views of Mary, of coming to their theology about Mary as the Queen of Heaven. So in the original language, Proverbs 8 is more referencing the feminine, using the feminine form of the words.
I was looking at Proverbs 8:24. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. And John 17:8 says, "For I have given unto them the words which you gave to me, and they have received them, and have known surely that I came out from you." Kind of I tie that in.
Yeah, the Jewish rendition of that would be as the feminine, the divine feminine, the feminine aspect of the Creator.
Yeah, like in that verse 24, brought forth, and it can also mean like in a birth type of a thing.
Yes, and that's where Arius was an Egyptian bishop, and so he would have studied all the Hermetic philosophies or had them available as well, and so he was the one that kind of redefined that as referring to the Archangel Michael, who became his point of view was the Archangel Michael is being referenced there.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. But.
Yeah, you just go back and you study Bishop Arius, and he talks about that. Which the Jewish, the Jewish teaching though is that's referring to the divine feminine aspect of, they look at God as having male and female aspects. So that would be the, in the original language, it's in the feminine, not masculine. So that's where the Hermeticists connected the goddess Sophia with Proverbs chapter 8.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that's a bunch of technical philosophical stuff, but it was a Bishop Arius. It was a Christian, Egyptian Christian that looked at it from a masculine point of view. Otherwise, all earlier writings were from that it was of a feminine aspect of the Creator.
Actually, and that's actually I like the verse that James brought in as far. What's really interesting about that, as far as the disciples, back in that John, starting in John 16:26, at that day you shall ask in my name, and I say not unto you that I will pray the Father for you, for the Father himself loves you because you have loved me and have believed that I came out from God. I came forth from the Father and have come into the world. Again, I leave the world and I go to the Father. And, this was the one time that, and then the disciples answer him. His disciples said unto him, Lo, now speakest thou plainly, and speaketh no proverb. Now are we sure that you know all things, and needest not that any man should ask thee. By this we believe that you came forth from God. So you can either interpret that coming from a pre-existence, or it could be coming out of God, that he came forth from God, being born. You know what I mean? You can
Right.
But what's interesting is the disciples said that was something that they understood. They go, now you're speaking plainly. Now we understood. And then he goes through that rest of the thing, and he says it again, that they believe that I came out from you. So it's I just saw when I remember reading that before, that I always thought that was interesting.
Yes, yes. Yeah, see, they dealt with their database that they had, and it's different than ours, and so we view it from our viewpoint, but they understood, like you say, they.
Aliens. That was a weird sound.
All right, who's squealing their wheels, huh?
That was my fault. Sorry, guys.
I hear aliens.
It sounded
Yes.
paleo to me.
There you go.
Well, a lot of people think that, this is one thing that Jewish teachers teach, is that, especially Kabbalah, is that Hebrew was the divine language that pre-existed before mankind was created. But the Bible itself that says that it was the language of the Canaanites, that Abraham took on the language of the Canaanites. So I don't follow the.
What does that say then?
Okay, I'd have to look that up. It's not on the top of my head, but it's a millennial prophecy, actually, that they'll learn the language of the Canaanite, referring to the Hebrew. They'll come to the land, and but the word Canaanite is in there. It wouldn't take me long to find it, but I don't remember chapter and verse. But if you know history, it's pretty obvious is that the Canaanite language was used all throughout that region, by the Phoenicians and that was a language that Sodom and Gomorrah used. Because Abraham talked back and forth with the people from Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot lived there. So it just logically, it's obvious that Abraham took on the language of the region. It wasn't a pre-existent language.
I think the angels know all kinds of languages, and who knows what kind of languages they had before. Or what did they speak? We don't know that. We don't know that.
No, but now the pre-flood, I believe there are artifacts from the pre-flood time that they're discovering, but I don't know if anybody really knows it all. But it like the Göbekli Tepe site that they're uncovering now in Turkey, that appears to be a pre-flood city that was just silted over.
What's your opinion on the Bible talks about a pure language, in the end?
Oh yeah, if you break that down, and I don't remember it well enough. I just heard it being parsed out the other day, and it agrees with what I read before. But it's like no swear words. People will talk, instead of talking dirty, they'll talk clean.
Yeah.
From that point of view is what the grammar indicates. Not that it's a separate language, but that it's a language of a purity of heart. People will speak nice words instead of dirty words.
Do you think everything will go back to Hebrew, or it'll be something different, though?
Well, that's in that same verse where it talks about learning the language of the Canaanite. I believe that the present languages will persist in each of the Gentile nations, and including the Hebrew in Israel. But people will use them without the swear words and without the cursing and without the, it's a purity of heart context.
Gotcha.
Not a separate language, which is intrinsic within the Hebrew, and it was all explained to me the other day, but I'm not remembering the exact words.
Okay.
Kind of ties in maybe with our Savior saying, let your, let yes be yes and let your no be no. Maybe, yeah.
Well, and then having a clean heart, and in other words, like the Apostle Paul says, for all of us in Philippians, it says whatever is true, whatever is good, the positives, we should not be dwelling on certain words, certain thought patterns. And we need to be encouraging to others, not ripping them apart. We need to be, kind and loving in all that we say and do. And so I try to follow what it says in Philippians, whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is true, whatever is pure. We're to speak those words, not the evil words.
Yeah, it ties in where Yeshua said basically that, all should know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another, as I have loved you. Basically, we're supposed to do the same thing as how he did it.
Yes.
That's that pure love.
Yes. And I wish I could remember now. Maybe it's getting late and I'm not thinking of it, but there's a specific way of analyzing the grammar, which shows that it's if you look at the same words, it's from the sense of that the Apostle Paul uses is only talk about praiseworthy things and not dwell in the gutter, not cursing, not cutting each other apart.
Not being crude.
And well, Yeshua is the word, and he is true. He is also the way, the truth, and the life. So anything that is not truth would be that evil language or a lie, which is opposite of the truth. So I think when we're all speaking Yeshua, like the truth, what his heart in our heart, there won't be words that are wrong there, because it will all be the truth. And anything opposed to Yeshua is from the enemy who bases everything on a lie. If that made any sense?
Well, that's the thing is the evil, the evil, our adversary or adversaries try to get us to dwell on the negative. And if you turn on TV and you watch the quote unquote news, it's they're always ripping the other party apart, twisting the truth, and that's actually the proper translation of iniquity is twisting. Iniquity doesn't refer to extreme evil; it refers to twisting the truth, which is we're seeing that on the media all the time. Everybody's twisting the truth to cut another person down. That's what you call iniquity.
Well, that's what we're all doing here. We have to overcome our faults, and we've all got them. Just like it says, we've all fallen short to the glory of God. But that's the thing with me, is that I was so polluted before he told me the truth, and then he told me the truth, and then you got to start working your way out of Babylon. So some things are easier to get rid of, and then other things are harder. But
my observation from our worldwide Church of God days was that the marketing end, the telecasts and all, talked about all the evil in the world, and it led to kind of a spirit of criticism. People trying to point out the truth, but actually just dwelling on the negative and the criticism. And I believe there was too much, ripping each other apart and beating each other down, and all in the name of truth. And I was very uncomfortable with the things that Garner Ted talked about a lot of time, because he really didn't know the technical side of things, and a lot of the things he was saying were wrong, but he did it to beat people down, to make our group look better.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of known for that more than Herbert Armstrong. And I had relatives that even pointed that out to me, that they didn't like to listen to Garner Ted because Herbert talked about the Bible and Garner Ted was just ripping everybody else down.
Wow.
And And then we find out as we study that a lot of the things he said were just embellishments that weren't even true. But they sold, they brought ratings up.
Do you know the Church of God pastor Rick Railston?
Yes, I do.
He had I remember listening to him one time. He had an interesting story. When he started pastoring when he was young, and the people, when he ran across the people that were educated through what was their school? The
Ambassador.
And he wasn't. He said, boy, those ambassador people, they would, once they found out that he had not gone to ambassador, they wouldn't even talk to him.
Yes. That there was that pride involved, and I believe the pride goes before the fall, and that's why that organization was dissolved, because they just needed to be dissolved.
Yeah.
And some people actually read the Bible, and I think that's a lot of our friends where they said, well, we're just going to go by what the Bible says, not just follow the new lies. And so we're still studying and trying to learn, but we realize that we weren't taught everything quite exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that organization had to be destroyed because we had to be released to find our way.
Yes, they had a number of false doctrines creeping in. Yes.
And so it was for, I learned good things there and true things, and I learned bad things. And after coming out of it, almost basically 20 years ago, it was like it's been a progress of understanding and gaining more and more wisdom and knowledge, and never would have happened if I'd have stayed in those organizations. It had just been always so cut and dried. No, this is it. But
yes,
we learn new things on our own, and we also learn wrong things, and that's where we get others.
Well, we
out, hey, you know what? I was wrong.
We keep looking for a new daddy. And so then we're susceptible, like they were saying about these Paleo Hebrew groups that come out and they act authoritatively and like they're going to teach you something, and they don't have a clue either if you really know the subject. But they set themselves up as experts, and but really, yeah, I thought the word Heblish was a very good description. That's why I pass it on. I call those guys Heblish speakers, like reading Paleo Hebrew left to right. That's that's a funny story.
Hey, Mike, this is
Yeah.
Al.
Yes.
Hey, can I take you back to the angel of the Lord study for a moment?
Yes.
Back to Exodus 33.
Okay, I could bring that up. Can you all still see my Bible Works on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, which verse?
Verse 2 and 3 at first. I have the King James up here. The whole point I'm trying to make here is that there seems to be a change of mind here. He says in verse 2 and 3, I will send an angel before you, and I'll drive out the Canaanite and the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and Jebusite onto a land flowing with milk and honey. So he's saying here, I'm going to send an angel. I myself am not personally going with you.
Yes.
Then you drop down to verse 12. And Moses said unto the Lord, see, now you say to me, bring up this people, and you have not even let me know who this is you're going to send with me. And you've said, oh, Moses, I know you by name. And that you also say that I have found grace in your sight. Now, therefore, I pray thee, if I have found grace in your sight, if that's a fact, show me your way that I may know you, that I may find grace in your sight, and consider that this nation, oh, by the way, it's your people. And he said, okay, my presence shall go with you, and I will give you rest. And Moses says back to him, if your presence does not go with me, then do not carry me up to that promised land. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in your sight? Is it not that you personally go with us? So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people on the face of the earth. And the Lord said to Moses, okay, I will do this thing also that you are asking for. For you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. So my point here is that if, back in verse 2 and 3, he says, I'm going to send an angel. And then down here from verse 12 through 17, it's as if there's an exchange here where Moses says, hey, you haven't even shown me who you're sending. I want you to go personally. And then he agrees to do it. I thought, wow, what an awesome exchange here. This is one of those things that you were talking about earlier, kind of like almost like standing in the gap kind of thing, or beseeching him to be the personal guide when it was not what he was going to do. So what do you think about that?
Well, what we're talking about here is also called the Shekinah. You know, the manifest presence, you might say. See, what we call Shekinah, the Shekinah, that's actually an Aramaic word, which goes back to the concept of the glory. You know, when the and when Solomon finished the temple, the glory, the Shekinah glory came down, and it was like again like a thick cloud,
Right.
and the people fell over because they were so. And then it says that glory left, you know, before the captivity. So that was when the presence, what we call the presence, but in the Hebrew, it's okay. Here's face. So, you know, we see that we have it not you know, the Yod He Vav He is not there in the Hebrew. That's implied. So others, like the Tanakh says, and he said, but really that's not either exactly literal either. You know, here we see panim, pani, that goes back to the face. You can see it in the definition there. And walk. Oh, so we see face, walk, rest, or settle down, and you know, towards. So it's doesn't translate very well just word for word, but like it says, is his face, you know, his face, like it said, he met face to face. In other words, his presence is probably a good English word that, you know, when he talks, well, panim, you know, face to face is a idiom for, you know, talking directly with each other. And so his presence, and I believe this is the Shekinah, is a concept that the Jews use about the glory being there just like in the cloud, the pillar, instead of being a pillar of fire and a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, there was a Shekinah. We call it Shekinah, English word.
Yeah.
Glory that was there at the temple at all times.
Yes, but back in verse 2 and 3, it's as if he's going to send someone else. But then Moses says, well, if you're not going to go personally with me, don't send me.
Well, that the angel of Israel, in other words, their national, we read about how in Daniel 9 about how Gideon wanted to go and deliver a message to Daniel, but the prince of Persia, we're talking the spiritual hierarchy, the prince of Persia withstood him, and then the archangel Michael came and helped. And so as far as in the hierarchy of angels, Michael the archangel is the angel that's given responsibility of Israel. And that's where the Jehovah's Witnesses, that's why they view they call Jesus, they use the English Jehovah and Jesus, that Jesus is an incarnation of the Archangel Michael, because they look at the angel of God. They use pretty much, they don't use any Hebrew at all, but the angel of God is equivalent to the Archangel Michael, is equivalent to Jesus Christ, is their doctrinal point of view.
Yeah, but are you catching my main point? In verse 2 and 3, he says, I will send my angel.
Yeah.
Then in verse 15, Moses says, if you aren't going to go with us personally, then don't send me. Well, it's almost like a challenge, or it's like a debate or some kind of a confrontation.
Well, yeah, it'd be like if daddy says to the kids, hey, I'm going to go away and give you a babysitter, and they cry, Daddy, mommy, don't leave us,
And the point is this, he was able to change his mind where he said,
yeah.
Okay, then I will do what you're asking.
I just love the interplay. To me, that's so interesting, is to see the interaction of the different parties in the Bible and to see their emotions come out. I mean, and to me, the whole book of Hosea is just to demonstrate the feelings, the emotion involved with, with the horrible things that Hosea's wife Gomer did to him, and God saying, this is how I feel about Israel.
But it's amazing that Moses felt comfortable even attempting that.
Well, who knows what how they interacted every day in the tent of meeting. I mean, they got together daily, so they were buds.
Yeah, that's just hard to imagine because we don't see that clearly, Oh yeah, he spoke to him face to face, right, as a friend, but we don't see all the details about that.
Well, I'd like to be in on some of the jokes that were told, the humor. Because I can definitely see humor in these the scriptures we read, especially Balaam,
Well, remember he resisted him too when Aaron took over talking for him too.
Exactly.
Well, I got a piece of humor for you. Did you know that 90% of college students think that Sodom and Gomorrah were married?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that they were actually just living together.
Yes, sir. Oh.
All right, now I'm done.
That was good.
Yeah, very good.
I'd like to put an advertisement in. Balaam was able to understand what his donkey was saying. It almost seems like he was involved with the occult in order to have powers like that.
Well, actually, this is another untold story amongst churches, but the Abraham was a father to many nations. And if you actually track back, Job was like a great grandson to Abraham, and he knew all about, well, the words used in there are a lot of times you see Eloha in the singular. And that's very interesting to look at. And the Midianites were descended, and they knew all about the God of Abraham, even though they were not descended from Isaac. You know, because they were descended through Keturah. The Kenites, you know, all of those, they were all taught by Abraham, and they all had some version of the truth. So my thought about Balaam is that, see, not only was Job a descendant of Abraham, but Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, was a descendant of Abraham. And if you look at the timing on it, counting the genealogy, Jethro was alive while Job was alive. And they would have known each other and not lived too far apart from each other. You know, because Job lived until he was 180.
Yeah, interesting in Job 2:11, it talks about Job's 3 friends.
Yes.
And Eliphaz the Temanite, who was a cousin of Joseph.
Yeah. Well, they were all cousins. That's the whole point, is they were all cousins in that area. And they were jealous of each other also. That's why
I say I'm a cousin to you too. I just have to go back so far as all.
Yeah, but see, it says that Abraham taught all of his children. That would have been his 5 sons that he had through Keturah also. You know, he lived long enough to bring them up past college age. And so he would have been their teacher during their whole youth. And so he would have taught them everything. So what these, you know, again, this same situation in the Middle East, they all have the same paternal DNA, you know, between the Arabs and the Jews, same paternal DNA. And they're all brothers, they're all cousins. But it's the same jealousy over who gets the property, just like in families when there's a dispute, you know, about the inheritance. It's just a family inheritance dispute. So all of the interaction between the Amalekites and the Midianites and all that before they got to Canaan, you know, which there would have been the Canaanites in Canaan, you know, the Jebusites and the Amorites and all those, they were descended from Ham. But along the way, all the Ishmaelites and the Edomites and, you know, then you get the Midianites and the Kenites and all the other Arab tribes. In fact, there was a tribe discovered in Saudi Arabia that actually traced their lineage back to Kenites, and they still had the same practices as the Kenites that lived with Israel. I mean, they maintained their tribal distinction, and they acknowledged that, you know, that you know, they're in other words, they're pro-Israel, not anti. Because Kenites always got along with the Israelites, even though they were Bedouins and lived in tents. If you look at the Septuagint, the last verse of the book of Job in the Septuagint, it gives the whole history of who Job was. And it is translated into the English. You don't have to read it in the Greek.
You reminded me of a joke I told my wife this morning. And I couldn't remember the word I'd used, and you brought it up. It was paternal and maternal. And that, of course, would probably be where you get the word pa and ma from.
Yes.
You know, never thought of it before, but yeah, it's I mean, I had it as a joke, but I think it's actually probably
Yeah, yes, it is.
logical.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when the Arabs, I mean, they're definitely like blood cousins, like practically first cousins to the Jews, and even now, you know. In fact, a lot of the Palestinians are actually Jews that lost their identity.
So I am going to say goodnight to everyone. It's been an interesting discussion on all this, and I want to thank you, Michael, for being there, and for Don Wales to be getting this thing out every once in a while. I appreciate that. So, well, nobody else has to leave because I am. But good night, you all.
Good night.
James.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Good
shalom.
night. Shabbat shalom.
I had another interesting experience. Maybe I should share with you.
Oh.
I was visiting a widow last week, and you know, she's alone a lot, and she's in her late 80s. And I'm sitting there. I had not eaten lunch, and there's a bowl of peanuts on the coffee table. So I start just nibbling a few of them, and in the course of talking to her, I keep nibbling away, and I ate a good portion of the bowl. And I apologized to her. I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry I did that. I haven't had lunch yet, and you know, I didn't realize I was eating so many." And she said, "Oh, that's okay. I can't chew those anything anyway. That's why all I do is suck the chocolate off of them."
Oh, good on you, huh? With that, I'll bow out for just a minute for another bathroom break, and I'll be right back.
Oh, sorry, Don. I got to use your airtime to tell all my bad jokes. You there?
Couldn't find my cursor. My mouse died. I think it died from that joke.
I bet something died, huh? Hey, I got to let those jokes out while I can, while I have an audience, you know.
Oh, okay. Is that kind of like passing gas? You got to let it out while you have an audience?
Yeah.
Well, I have an audience here. I just want to remind everyone about those 5 kids in Costa Rica. Anyone who didn't hear me, there's 5 young children in Costa Rica that a friend of ours is out there, and he's promised to pray for these 5 children up until March 15th. And we don't know their names, but they've been abused and they're suffering, and he's promising that God will heal these children through prayer. So I would ask everyone to pray for these 5 unnamed children in Costa Rica, that God would heal them, and the people that are in charge of them would be willing to admit that they see the power of God through prayer. So please be diligent in praying for them every day. Just 5 children in Costa Rica. And thanks for listening.
I just wrote it down.
Okay, thank you. And hopefully we can get a report back after March 15th, and we'll share it on this airway, so everyone who's been praying will be able to thank our God in heaven who's listening to these prayers, and he's going to make his power known through these children.
Is this Ed? Yeah. Okay. Well, Mike has joined me on here. He's left the studio and come out here into the peanut gallery.
I'm still around. I still got it up in case there's a Bible verse, but I figure, well, now we're into the fellowship time.
I'm going to kill the recording here.